Today we're going to be talking to Trevor Thorn from Thorn Homes, based in Cheltenham. Trevor's a really good medium-sized building contractor that also builds stuff and develops for himself. We're going to be talking about how he funds everything 100% through private equity and investors and never uses banks, why he doesn't like modern methods of construction, and why up until fairly recently he's been focused on only buying sites with planning, until I told him that that's a really bad idea. So let's get on with it. Trevor.
Paul,
Hello,
are you?
mate. I'm good, how are you?
Good.
Good. So right, here we are inside property development,
Yep.
talking about all of the stuff we have to deal with. So, but before we start, just give me, like, how did you start? Where you based? How did you start?
Based in Gloucester, started as a self-employed roofer, then sort of just progressed on.
How long ago was that? Just out of interest?
22 years ago, something like that. 19, roofer.
Yeah.
Went on my own, just subbing around with different builders, developers, and then slowly. Now this is like 2004, 2005. So, then stumbled over the self-cert mortgage, and then that's how I sort of bought my first house. Did that up, remortgaged it, second mortgage, further advance. I think I had a second further advance, and when every time that I did that, I didn't waste it on cars and holidays. I bought more and more property, and then by the time I was sort of 24, 25, I just bought a building plot for 2 houses, 2006.
Interesting.
And I was still roofing, so I was still literally on the tools and just doing this on the side sort of thing, and then that's where it all started, really. And then I still got some of the lads that worked with me on that first site. I still got 3 or 4 of them now.
Very good. Wow. All these years later.
18 years. Longest person I've had with me, 18 years. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you sort of started off doing refurby stuff, and then you got to doing a couple of new builds.
Yeah.
Buying site with planning, I'm assuming.
Everything we're planning. Yeah. Just because that's where the value is. With as I've done it, and even that on my first one, I took investors on. Obviously, that's a big part of my thing is actually I don't fund anything with banks. We've had this conversation before, because I've seen, I've built lots of houses as a building contractor. So as I, just rewind the step, as I sort of doing, a couple of houses which I end up renting. One I lived in fact, my first house, I ended up moving out of that and renting that out, just so that because obviously I'd mortgaged it to the hilt and, and beyond. But I did the right thing with the money. And then, of course, when I built these first 2 houses, just brought in sort of friends, family, pulling in all the favours that I've been working for, and then slowly, and then I got in with the architect. So the architect, when I bought the site, the same architect then came on board, so I employed him to do I think it was the building regs drawings and some other bits. And then he then said, do you want me to send you some leads? And then I started, then all of a sudden I took on a small extension, and then, slowly I got the cogs turning. And, we
cool. So anyway, so you started off roofing as well. So 2 things.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about all of this, but you sort of did 2 things at the same
Yes.
time. So you started off in roofing, obviously started doing some small scale development stuff, but also then that roofing business sort of grew as well, didn't it, into more contracting?
Yeah, so the roofing business, kind of when the roofing went up as I was, so 19, 20, I'd just gone on my own, I was keen, I was physically on the tools, there's back then, there is now, there was no such thing as a qualified roofer. So you couldn't go and get an MVQ, which actually on a roofing side is a problem now, because some of our roofers are at that age where there was an MVQ didn't even exist, so now we're trying to get people possibly to do it 10 years after the event, because there is a roofing qualification. And then, slate tiler on the tools and working for other builders. That was kind of exactly where I started, as a one-man subcontractor.
Yeah. And then how did that sort of morph into more general contracting and stuff?
Well, because I was working for builders,
right.
Friends of mine, good friends of mine were all builders. That's how I picked up my own client base as a roofing contractor. And, when small scale, then I got to like 3 or 4 of us. I did do a thing years ago where I actually signed somebody else's van that weren't our van, and then I put them all up, lined them all up together, we had photographs with different people putting hard out on a T-shirt. And,
so hang on, so what happened? You signed someone's van that wasn't your van?
Yes. Yeah,
or you borrowed a van?
I sort of borrowed a van to sign write it. Then I had a couple of other lads just put hard out on a T-shirt on. I did some
to make it yourself look bigger than you were.
I was under the VAT threshold.
Right.
And then probably like 6 or 8 months later, I had a call off our accountant and said, "Oh, we've asked why such a size, and you're not VAT registered." But the reality was there was just me and one other,
Yeah.
But that was how I was trying to get things going.
Yeah, no, look, that's good advice, Riggs. That's sometimes everyone's got to start somewhere, and you obviously shouldn't be bullshitting, but you've got to be a bit creative and be clever, haven't you?
Yeah, but you've got to be seen to, I wanted people to trust that we do a good job, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to elevate that, that message to say that actually, we do a good job, look at these vans and all our guys. And slowly, I got there eventually as a roofer. And then I started to compete then. The dynamic started to change when I started getting leads off an architect, who I still work with now, by the way. All of a sudden I was competing with people I was working for, and then that's where the sort of decision made. That's where 2000 I incorporated. It was funny because I incorporated my primary company, Thorn Homes. I incorporated that in July 2008. So just as everybody else was going down,
good timing.
I remember, I think it was my mum or somebody said, "Gosh, everybody else is closing up and you're opening up." But I never had no debt. I literally, not in terms of like Travis Perkins or all the rest of them, but some friends of mine that were into, I had mortgages across houses and all the rest of it, but it was service debt. So it was never really, I hadn't had 10 years of good times and then hit a bad time. So as far as I was concerned, all it did for me was level out the field.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
then that's, then and of course I could undercut everybody,
So how did you make that jump then in terms of bigger jobs? Because obviously the whole VAT threshold thing is not good in a lot of ways because it keeps people small, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. Well, because you either got to go for it and go right for it. The 80, I know they've raised it now, but the 80 odd grand, you either got to go from 80 to 150 to make it. Yeah. And if you're going to sit around 100 grand mark, obviously you might as well stay smaller because you lose money.
Exactly.
So, and then I never VAT registered as a roofer. And then I slowly, then my accountant sort of incorporated the company. I built the 2 houses that I'd acquired by then. I did have a falling out with my accountant over that site because I learned an early VAT lesson there, because I'd borrowed the money off NatWest, as it goes, as a sole trader. Trevor Thorn trading as Thorn Homes was my business then, and I had my roofing thing, so I had to keep the 2 separate. And then, of course, all the way through building these 2 houses, I'm keeping all my VAT receipts, sort of rubbing my hands together a little bit, think, right, at the end, I'm going to be entitled to that VAT back. And as it goes, because of 2008, I ended up renting all of them, because I had 2, there was small, a 1 up, 1 down flats, 2-bed flat, 2-bed flat, 2 houses. And then I couldn't have the VAT back. So I had words with the same accountant, because I should have geared it up differently from the start.
Yeah, I think it's important that people know that, because building to hold. I know that wasn't originally your plan, but sometimes you sort of get forced into things. So you can't sell stuff. You have to refinance it or doing it a different way. Building to hold for investment. The rules are different if you're building to sell, the typical house builder or developers model, and that is complicated. So people, if they're going down that route, need to definitely take proper advice, otherwise you can come seriously unstuck, can't you?
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I got caught. I'd saved, in my view, because I was only a youngster, in my view, I'd saved at 23 or 24 grand of VAT, and I thought that was going to come back. Never did. Ended up letting them for a long time. Obviously, the recession came along. I then started, small scale contracting. So, I was just doing extensions. As architect was sending me leads, 4 or 5 a week. I was going around, just. And then all of a sudden I picked up 1 job, 2nd job, and then slowly, and there's a fair few of us now.
So how was it in sort of like 2008 onwards? Because I think, both in contracting and developing, I don't think people that have never been through anything like that, don't actually realise how sideways it can go until it happens. So how was it for you?
Yeah, there was some scary times. There was some upsides as well. Certainly on my NatWest mortgage, because I'd had a self-cert NatWest development loan that I think was for 18 months initially, and that rolled on. So in all the mist of everything happening, I sort of kept my head low. I'd finished the houses by now. I'd rented them.
Hang on, and that was a development loan with NatWest?
Yeah, with NatWest,
in 2008?
Yeah, I think I took it in 2006.
Oh, right.
But this is by 2008.
Okay, and they've been paid back by then?
No. So I still had a development loan anchored against the houses, but because I had them, I was thinking about it on the way here, I think I had them at like 0.5% above base, and it wasn't initially, but because I'd rented them, all of a sudden my business manager changed, everything got switched up, all happened so quickly. I just serviced the loan, rented them, and then carried on.
But so basically you got rid of the development loan and just turned it into...
No, I just kept the development loan there, yeah. They never ever came back to me it was 4.5 years, I think I kept that loan.
Wow, that's really surprising.
Yeah.
Because obviously NatWest is RBS.
Yeah, I know,
who shafted a lot of people during that time. So maybe your thing, maybe it was just too small. It was just looking after itself. They had bigger ththings to worry about. I don't know.
Well, I even got to the point where whenever I rang NatWest, I always rang switchboard. Yeah. What I didn't want to do is ring a business manager that would have a look at what loan I was on.
Oh, you were right. Maybe I think they were too busy shafting me.
I think, and then I kept my head low, and then eventually, eventually they wrote me a letter and said, look, this development loan's long. I'd made all the payments, never skipped a beat.
Very good.
Just a quick word to say thank you to our sponsors, LandTech, creators of LandInsight, which is the industry-leading bit of software to help developers find and analyse the potential of real 100% off-market development opportunities. I've been involved in the business for over 10 years now, and if you don't know what it basically does what people like me used to have to do the old-fashioned way, which is hunt around and get together all of the key information that's needed in order to make sensible decisions on the development potential of land. So that's planning data, market research, lists of all of the various constraints, environment and agency information, you name it, massive long list of all of the stuff that you need in order to find out who owns land, what policy constraints there might be, and exactly what you may or may not be able to do with it. All of the industry leading developers use it, and also the most clued up smaller ones. So if you're not already using it and you want to trial for yourself, have a look in the show notes. You'll find a link to get a free trial, test it for yourself, see what you think, and hopefully get busy finding real off-market development opportunities. So thanks again to our show sponsors, LandTech, and let's get back to the show.
But so generally, so what happened during that period? So I don't know about you, actually, luckily enough, it's one of the times I was quite glad that planning can take so long, because I had other deals at various stages of the pipeline or tied up and whatever. So they sort of came out the other side, because one of the advantages of development taking so long, I had sites tied up that weren't on site or whatever. So, but as a sort of general rule, I don't know, but 2008 to 2011-12 was all pretty dead, really. Certainly for me, there wasn't that much.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was different between you and I. I was obviously, I was a young lad then. I hadn't done anything in planning at that point. This was literally me from a standing start. A friend of a friend was selling his site. I managed to raise some money. My mortgage advisor that was doing some of the other mortgages said, we've, got this NatWest loan, and I just sort of, closed my eyes, signed the paperwork, and went for it. Put the same effort into it, called in all the favours at this point. Because remember, it's the first one I'd done. Yeah. So, it wasn't like I'd done a load and I'd burnt all my favours up. I was still using favours from friends, and, other people, I was doing roofs for free, and then getting the carpenter to come fit kitchens, for example. So I was doing all that sort of stuff. So I was in the midst of when the 2008 came, everything that I had was sort of serviced. And I did keep my head low with NatWest. They didn't, to be fair, they didn't come for me, but what I owed them and what I built was in the hundreds of thousands. I didn't owe them an obscene amount compared to what they had elsewhere. In fact, my real problem came in 2011, 2012, and not through me, because then by 2008 to say 2010, I'd gone up from 2 roofers to 12 blokes, a gang of different trades, our ground workers on by this point, just building extensions. Again, not doing planning permission. I'm getting all my work from same architect, who's actually part of us now, and then I got introduced to another fella that was building. I built him 11 houses on one site. He'd already done a block of flats. And then he was with Clydesdale. And then in 2011, they poured his funding, and he had all his funding wrapped up with Clydesdale. And I got caught in the midst of somebody else's development. Because I was funding his site on monthly valuations. I was being paid in arrears. You know, we were good friends. Every time I needed money, he always paid me. Then all of a sudden, it's Clydesdale. Clydesdale rolled in, and he nearly came and went, and I had to, So I actually had more trouble from the follow-on than I did with the initial shock. You know, and that's through working for somebody else.
So what happened there?
In the end, I lost about 25 grand.
So it's interesting. See, I don't think, some people might not realise it's like, as you know, developers, certainly when the funding gets pulled and the plug gets pulled on you, or things go seriously tits up, it can sort of go down the line and affect everyone involved.
I'll tell you this, this is a chap, and if he saw this, he'd know exactly who he is. We were friends for years and years and years. When I had my first son, he opened a bank account, come round and dropped it. He gave it to my wife, my girlfriend and wife now. We were good friends, and the bank totally changed the way he had no choice but to operate, because all of a sudden they were pulling what they were pulling halfway through his project, and then of course by default he had to defend his own position, which meant not just me, the rest of us all got cut loose. And that's the problem, where you end up with a tail wagging the dog. And when I went through that situation, that was going on for 8 months. I had to go and see some suppliers, mate. It was worse for me then than it was in 2008, because now all of a sudden I did owe the Travis Perkins and I did owe the Build Base and all the rest of it. And I slowly sort of traded my way through that, which we did. Today carried on trading and just traded out of the problem. But now and then, since as I got more and more up to date, I'm working with the architect and I know planning, now starting to submit planning for, small extensions. And then when we started doing our own stuff, we've done probably 30 houses that we've bought the land, built and sold. I don't use a bank at all. So, everything that we've got now, we've become accidental landlords in the last 6 months. 5 houses we built. We could have sold them, but quite frankly, on what they were going to sell for, we'd have them ourselves. So therefore, we've kept them. And instead of financing them, I have got some creative way that we fund deals with private investment. And, we've got substantial rent coming in, which effectively just gets carved up every month pro rata. So it works very well. Now, if that would have been a bank, we would be getting pushed into a corner. Surveyors and surveyor fees and revaluations and loan to values being adjusted. And, I think that... I think the bank's got a lot to answer for, especially when, you say your story with RBS, you've got somebody totally capable of exiting that project, yet, they sort of screw you anyway,
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before, but for, people listening, it's worth talking about that, because it's, again, I'm one of the key things I'm trying to do here is to help support and grow and help more SME developers and smaller house builders, right? But in order to survive and thrive, everyone needs to be well aware of the problems and the ways around them, hopefully, and also what can happen when the shit hits the fan. So, for example, in the 2008-9, when the shit did hit the fan, I had 5 reasonable sized deals on the go. 4 of them were funded by RBS. 1 of them was funded by Close Brothers, right? Now, in hindsight, that was obviously a real silly mistake, having too many eggs in one basket. But also, RBS probably the worst of the worst in terms of pulling the plug on people. These were all good deals. My normal model, as it has been for years, proper off-market sites, tied them up on really good terms, went away and added significant planning value, and then on top of those, that put a fair chunk of my own equity in.
So you're already in front before you began.
I was already in front. There was a whole load of notional, value created in the deals and equity, and on top of that, I had a load of real equity, my own money in the deals, because I never wanted to borrow too much and be over leveraged. So by doing that, I thought I was being really sensible and safe. At the time, there were people borrowing 90, 95, even 100%, right? And I wasn't anywhere near that. I'm really low, like 60% and stuff like that. Yeah. Now, of course, banks, as we all know, effectively ran out of money, didn't have any money, couldn't continue to fund things, didn't want to continue to fund things, they just had to try to get money in. So because there was so much equity and value in my deals, they were the first ones that got the plug pulled on them. to basically get their money back and get my value out as well.
If they sold for 65% and that's all they were owed, they weren't worried about your bit that belonged to you, and that's the problem. And that's why with these, the first charge one thing, but then they all take these background, they get you right to the edge, in my opinion, especially when you've got a deal, you've been through, you've ticked all the boxes, and then they ask for additional background charges and blame somebody else behind them and all the rest of it. And it is a one-sided, it's a one-sided problem with banks.
Yeah, I mean, that is just the nature of it. But I think it's important to people that don't know, to know that when the shit does hit the fan, things can and do change very, very quickly.
Yes.
So that they go into things with open eyes, don't think, oh, it's all great, it's a lovely bank, they're not going to, it's all going to stay this way. Because,
First thing they do is take your manager off you. So you build your relationship with your manager, you think, you've been ringing him, depending on the size of your business, you ring him on the mobile, he always takes your call, you try and bypass ringing through switchboard or whatever, and he's the first one they get rid of to remove that
with
personal.
Our RBS, can't even remember what it's called now. They set up a whole new division, global restructuring.
Yeah.
Basically, the shafting department.
Yes. Yeah.
And luckily enough, I just about survived by the skin of my teeth. My equity was wiped out. I had to sell everything I'd built up in the previous years. No one lost money. All the subbies, everyone that's working for me, I effectively paid back out of my own money. So the only person that actually lost money was me. Now, that's obviously stood me in good stead now because, all those people are very loyal to me. But it was seriously painful. And I was literally skin of my teeth that I didn't get wiped out,
Yeah. I can believe it, and you think of all the others that did get wiped out. And the chap that I talked to, interestingly, it was like 2011 this was, I think they broke him. I'm not sure whether he eventually got out of him, but even if he did get out of it, life changed forever. Because your whole course, all the money that you owe, the assets. It
really is. It's diabolical, really. Certainly, what they did to people. There's people with been committed suicide and all sorts of stuff based on some of the out of order stuff they did.
And the fees, they're fee mad. I think Lloyd's got pulled up with one of their sister companies that they were sending people to, and it's not necessarily always in property, but during that time, they saw a window of opportunity and they took it. And that's part of the reason why still, my model is, even though, where somebody's trying to raise 25% because they're borrowing, say, 75% or 35%, 65% off the bank, I have to raise 100%, which makes my life twice as hard, because rather than taking, raising 3, 4, 5, 600,000 and beyond, I'm not just raising that for a deposit. So some people that I speak to think that my model, I don't stretch the money far enough. But then, I haven't got the fees, the surveyors, the monitoring surveyors, and, so that's, that's sort of the way
there is quite a lot to be said for that. So we'll go into that in a bit more detail. I've got to say as well that, there are better banks, and I always credit where credit is due. Out of, I'd like to say 5 deals, 4 with RBS, 1 was with Close Brothers. Close Brothers were fantastic. Proper old school, and there was nothing wrong with my deals. Stuck with me, saw it through, got it built, got it sold. Everyone got paid back. We all actually even made a few quid. And and Close Brothers did that with pretty much everyone. So they didn't go around shafting people. So there's definitely a range of funders. They are not all the same, and there are some good ones, but you just got to make sure you find the right ones.
Yeah.
But I know even with that, that's. You're still very conservative, aren't you?
I'm conservative. I built a lot of solvency in now. Over the years, I've been, I'm a believer of, some people that I actually speak to and try and just change their course. Your business should be more wealthy than you are as a person, because that's where you get your, that's where you're ultimately where your own income comes from. So, I always like to, if I don't take money unnecessarily from our company, never have done. And if it's got to stay in there, then leave it in there. And then you get to a point where we just take the same every year. I've bought, interestingly, I bought and sold houses that I didn't even tell my wife that I bought them. And, sometimes I sold them on, say, a Friday, and my day didn't change. I'm not down somewhere popping champagne and having the Monday off. I just go back to work as usual, because when you get to a point, you just find that it just becomes a tool, I think. Yeah. The money side of things. And when you sell something, you already have your eye on something else. So that money is sometimes pre-allocated, because you don't want to sit, you want to reinvest it again. And that's where I don't want to end up putting my future in possibly somebody else's hand. So, I go and borrow you know, we've been talking about the houses that we got now, you know, couple of million quid's worth of houses sat there effectively unencumbered. You know, we could release a load of that cash, but what's it at the sacrifice of? So we're having that debate ourselves now, because all of a sudden you are talking, you know, first charge. I mean, the setup charges now, gosh, I thought 1% in, 1% out was high. You know, as 5% in now is seemingly a good deal, 7% being the average. You know?
Yeah, so again, for people in the know sort of know, but there'll be other people that don't. They just get focused on the interest rate, and whereas in actual fact, obviously you've got to look at the total cost. And very often, you know, in fees, out fees, extension fees, all of this sort of stuff, it tends to
But it all adds up. So when they say to you, you know, it's only 4.8% in this occasion, you know, it's not really, is it? Because, you know, they're trying to tie you in for 5 years, 5 year setup fee. Well, then, you know, look at that. You either look at it, they're taking a chunk of the equity straight away for just arranging the loan, or you're actually paying nearly 6%, you know? And, you know, these days, if you're only getting 5-6%, your additional equity on this one, we haven't done it yet, it's been discussed, but, you know, looking at 65%, your 35% is not working for you at all. Nothing. You're getting no income really from that, because 100% your income, if you deduct off the 1%, you're paying it to the bank. You know, it's a real it's a tough market out there now. And I'm just glad that we're in a position now where the interest rates changed last year as a contractor, because my primary thing is I'm a building contractor, right? So number one.
So percentage-wise, you know, in terms of your development business and contracting business, what would you say?
Oh, at the moment, 100%. I'm just contracting now. I just can't find the deals. I just cannot find things. Hence, I've met you in the last, you know, and I don't, you know, we've obviously met through, you know, I saw your advertising. I've looked at, you know, a lot of people on YouTube. Obviously, I've been going a long time, so I take it with a pinch of salt. You know, there's so much stuff out there where they're just selling things that don't actually happen. And as it goes, we use the same solicitor. Yeah. And then one day, I think I was speaking to Richard, and then I mentioned LandInsight. He mentioned you, and I said, oh, I know that name. And then hence, that's why, you know, I've been using LandInsight, for 18 months? Since you and I have been working together the last 4 months, I am using it differently. I'd never have got rid of it, and I'm using it for all sorts of different reasons, because I'm doing all sorts of different things, but I have not been using it in the way that you and I have been looking at it a bit differently. So I am using it. So
let's jump back, because I know you said, like, so I didn't realise, I know you got a few little bits on the go. I didn't realise you were mainly just contracting at the moment, and you mentioned it's because you're struggling to find, deals that stack up, but that's because you're looking at stuff with planning.
That is on the market, yes.
that I always tell people not to do.
I mean, so. I'm in the trouble is the way that obviously, you know, where you're approaching landowners, it's a slow burn, and I found myself really, I probably should have talked to you 18 months ago to get them cogs turning, but obviously now I'm at that early stage of using LandInsight and chasing different landowners in different ways, whereas I am looking at things on site. And as you've said, it's, you know, you bid your profit away. You know, I've lost, this year I've probably made 6 offers, lost them all. And lost them all because we're making reasonable, sensible offers that stack up, that keep a margin in it for us. But of course, then others are just paying too much.
Right, now there's like a couple of important bits around that, because, you know, one of the things with the SME and smaller house builder industry, for example, is like historically, they were actually lots and lots like you. They were good little builders, and they'd like buy some land, you know, maybe do contracting for other people, but they'll buy some land, build some houses, do it again, and grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how, you know, lots of the big ones grew until planning and stuff started getting so hard, and then they had to give up or go bust. Or actually, what happens certainly in the 90s in particular, and the early 2000s, is all the big boys ended up buying all the little ones just to get hold of their land. Yes, so a load of them got wiped out that way, and a load more just went bankrupt, gave up, retired, because it got so complicated. So like even now, because I really want to help them all grow again, but the problem is planning, and so lots and lots of them they focus, like you have been doing, on buying sites with planning, because they don't want to deal with that shit, and it is complicated. And it's interesting because obviously I know you built a lot of stuff and you're a good builder. If you are going to be buying stuff with planning, this is like a little bit of a message for everyone, you better be an absolutely shit hot builder that's on it with everything. You know exactly what your costs are, and you keep control of them, because you're only really left with the build element to get your profit out of.
Yeah.
But you're saying, like, even now, it's getting to the point whereby there's still just not enough in it.
There's still just not enough in it. I mean, that's the problem. There are people that, since the recession and all the rest of it, people have got more and more creative with money, haven't they? So there are a lot more people doing what I do, not necessarily 100% funded by investors, but of course I got to share it out. So my only margin is what I can make because I'm already paying somebody else the value. But then that's a double-edged sword because, if I said to investor, right, I found a piece of land, for example, it's probably going to take us a year to get planning. They would look at that as like, you start splitting down the returns per annum. They'd be looking at that like over 2 years, de-risk it, i.e. de-risk it by getting the planning. And some people would rather pay that bit extra for the certainty. But then you've only got one place you make your margin. And where does it end up with? Ends up now where we've effectively I'm in a position that I never knew I'd be in, where I've effectively got more money than I can actually spend because I can't find anywhere to spend it, and that's because I can't find anything that stacks up.
Yeah. So just on that, I think I know the answer to this question I'm just about to ask you, but I'll be interested to hear your opinion. So in terms of, like you just said, I think it was 6. You've looked at 6 sites with planning.
Offered on them all,
bidding on them.
Yeah.
Can't get anywhere near that. Who is it that ends up buying them?
A lot of them with the agents, you don't actually know, but I think that majority are just other small developers that probably have just willing to either A, work for less, or B, it all goes wrong, doesn't it? I mean, especially you look around Cheltenham, the things that, that I see and then, it's still there, the scaffold's still up, somebody's scratching around like an old bloody turkey and no work's actually getting done. And I think, gosh, I'd be putting flowers in the drive, and then you find out that actually it was a horror story. And, as I think I've said to you before, it frustrates me sometimes where you got, like, not just me, I got a good team of lads, all care, all turner, all early birds, they're all prepared to, and I share the wealth around. When we've sold houses, I've looked after key people. That's how I keep people for a long time. I treat them right. I get on with everybody, see them all as friends, and that's how you build up a good team. And yet, somebody will go and buy something and I think, gosh, how did they go and do that? Whereas because you've got somebody on the fly that's maybe can convince somebody else to do it, but then they haven't got a skill set to actually build it. So the amount of people that pay too much and then it goes wrong, that story is out there. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't know anything else, right? So if I was not doing this with you, I would still be building something for somebody else, right? Because that's all I know. So therefore, if we're building it for ourselves, A, I can drive the cost down because I have control over all the lads, and I, we're on because of our spend, we're on sort of tier 1, pricings. We've got good, I've got a procurement chap that literally all he does is make sure we don't pay too much for anything. I mean, too much for anything now is still too much because of where things went with COVID, right? But again, that's driven our costs up.
Yeah.
So where I was thinking, where you would make, 20-25% on something that is on market, all of a sudden now I'm looking at my prices and I'm having to bake in a contingency that 5 years ago I would have took a risk on. I said, yeah, we wouldn't need that because I knew where our costs are at, whereas now they're also out of my control. So now on market stuff, you've got stuff that's too expensive, even when it came on. Then you've got somebody that's just paying too much, and then you've got build costs you can't control, and your margin just whittled away. And then you get to the end and you think, was it worth it? And a lot of people, I think, for your viewers, and I think what people don't realise as well, everybody tells you the good bit at the end, right? If you're looking at something off market, which could say 6 months, like that would be great if you could get planning in 6 months, but 12 months in today's world's probably realistic. From the time you did a deal.
Yeah, look, I think most people would be happy if they could guarantee that they'd get planning in 12 months. I mean, I think that'd be good going for most things.
But the point I'm making then, if you've got 12 months, all that site's going to do is, you've got to put your time into it. And if you skip a beat, as you said, if you don't tie everything up, all of a sudden you end up 6-8 months into a refusal, back to square one. So you do 12 months, you put everything into it. Then let's say, somebody like me going to build it out, if it's a single dwelling, call it another 12 months, say 3 months to sell it, right? You're into that site now for 27 months. Now remember, for 27 months you haven't been paid. Yeah, all that you've done is borrow to build. You've done all the legwork up front. You've done all the planning, and I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong, especially developers. Where I've seen people around my area where all of a sudden they give up the bread and butter. They're no longer building contractors. They're way too arrogant probably jumps to mind, but and then they go off and do their thing, and all of a sudden they've gone because it just strangled them from a cash flow perspective, and hence that's why I keep the mix.
Yeah.
That's why I keep the mix.
Yeah, see, it's that's exactly right. So your answer was the same as mine, really. The people that pay too much for stuff that you can't compete with, well, you wouldn't want to compete with those because they're paying too much. They basically, it could be a combination of things. Maybe they got super cheap money from somewhere. I don't know. But most, look, you're obviously a good builder. You're super on it. You've got your own blokes. You're procuring things properly, so you ain't really gonna cheap, unless you're Barrett's buying millions of bricks a year, and you can, your costs are, you ain't gonna probably build that much cheaper than you, right? So they're not gonna be beating you on the build cost. The only people that do is they basically get stuff wrong. That's how it happens. And of course, look, and that's not good for them. Obviously, the best thing that can happen is they might just not make any money or very much money. Worst thing can happen is everything goes tits up and they go bust and they disappear. That's one of the reasons we haven't got enough.
And the problem is, behind a spreadsheet, when you're trying to dress something up, we've talked about this before. You can. Over the years, I've tightened it up. 10 years ago, and we bought our first development that we bought, I think it was 2013, something like that. Now, back then, you could be a bit more creative. 2014 for sales, 15 for selling, right? 2014, 15, right? You could, like I said to you, the build costs were a lot lower, and there was a margin of error there that you could get away with. And nowadays I can't get away with it, because all you've got to do, you can accidentally lie to yourself behind a spreadsheet, because you can go, yeah, it's definitely 325, definitely 325, when in your heart of hearts it's 300, right? And I could definitely build it for 100 or 125, and you ordinarily can convince yourself that the deal is a deal. Then you go ahead and put in a higher offer. I pull out. You guys go ahead. Then you realise the 125 is 175. The 325 is now 295. And before you know it, you're throwing the keys at somebody. And that happens too often. And the problem is, landowners, I don't think, are being, especially with likes of Sill coming in, landowners are not willing to buckle.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? So they don't understand. So I'll very often say, but one of the many problems we have to deal with in this industry is landowners' unrealistic expectations.
Yes.
They don't know how, look, most developers don't know how to do a proper development appraisal. As you just said, they get it wrong, fill the figures, make it look like it works.
Yeah.
And if the market goes up in the 2 years, 3 years there from start to finish, they might make a few quid and they think they're geniuses. But if it goes flat or down, all of, they get caught with their pants down and they either lose money or go bust. Yeah. So that's basically what happens all of the time, right? And but of course, landowners don't understand that. They don't know how to do development appraisals. They just want top dollar. Of course they do. And part of the problem is, of course, when you've got idiots that don't know what they're doing, and they pay them top dollar, and they can't explain. It's a little bit of a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in a weird way, just because of the imbalance of the supply and demand. You've got loads of desperate people, house builders and builders and developers want to build stuff, not enough land, not enough planning permissions, and as a result, when people are selling land, people with planning permission, well, they're only looking for one idiot, and usually you get a number of idiots bidding against each other, and you've got to be very good and lucky to buy stuff with planning and make any money.
Or you've got to let it go and let the deal fall through. So, that's happened where someone's paid you and then they come back.
That's what you've got to do, isn't it? But it's hard, isn't it? If you're, everyone wants to, you want to stay in business, you want to keep doing deals and all the rest of it. Hence, people sort of get forced into doing things they shouldn't really do. Yeah.
And that's where I've been, we sort of agreed a price. This is on one where I did do an option over 4 pieces of land. We'd had an arrangement, and of course, right at the last minute, they get a land agent over promises. As it goes, what I was paying was probably okay because there's no planning permission, so they realised that I was doing all the legwork, I'm paying for it, and taking all the risk. But the land agent, that chap there, could have. He nearly shuffled the deal for me, sort of thing, because all of a sudden he's told them, wow, with planning permission, it's going to be worth X. And then all of a sudden they're not worried about their bit. Now they're honed in on my bit, and I had to sit down with the 4 of them and say, look, you've got to realise that if this doesn't get permission, I walk away with nothing having done all the effort.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely.
And the deal did go on, and they didn't go near the land agent. We did the deal. But again, in today's world with the internet and all these other easy places to find, you go and set the tone for somebody on buying, whether that be a garden or a small field or infill site for 1, 2, 3 houses. You get so far, and trying to keep a landowner not necessarily away from an agent, but to keep their expectations, because the agent doesn't mind what they sell for because they're only on a fee, whereas we're not on a fee, but we want to continue on to get the permission.
Yeah, and of course, the agent also doesn't really know, what the land's worth. Working out, two things: working out what a bit of land is really worth, and then actually making it worth that by optimising it and coming up with the best planning permission. It's not an easy thing to do. Landowners don't understand that. Of course, they don't know how to do it. Agents don't either. So, and very often, they're just talking it up, either because they think they know what they're on about and they don't, or just as likely, they're just headlining it to get a foot in the door, aren't they? That's all they care about,
Yeah.
So actually, as you know, we discussed this before, managing landowners' expectations and educating them to how it all really works is part of the art of getting off-market deals done on sensible terms,
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you've got to try and catch them early, and, going through what you think you might get, what you actually get, and how it changes the deal. Where we've done, again, small option agreement, but we made this way more complicated than it needed to be. And that was one where we tried to guess all the outcomes of planning. And this wasn't Richard, by the way, but the other solicitor, he had a little bit to answer to there. And we tried to guess all the different outcomes and have a value to all them different outcomes. And, it needn't have been so complicated. As it went, we got one of the outcomes and then paid that sort of price. But that took us months, and that probably took us 6 months to get that through before I could actually go to submit the planning application, because I couldn't submit the application because I didn't want the result of the application prior before we tied the site up. Yeah. So that would have left us open.
Although obviously, as you now know, in actual fact, the better you get at this stuff, the planning and the design and the optimization, the more able you are actually to be confident of what you're going to get.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me about, because I know you're involved with the FMB, so yep. I'm a bit more involved in the HBF. So the sort of two of the sort of main industry bodies within house building and construction and development are the HBF, the Home Builders Federation, who I would say tend to be a bit bigger. It includes all the sort of PLCs and the nationals, and then the FMB, the Federation of Master Builders, which are, I would say, sort of down the slightly smaller end of the market, not just the massive guys. Is that not right?
Yeah, so they look after, obviously, your one-man bands, right up to, small house builders, I suppose, are starting to use them. They're becoming a little bit more mainstream, but obviously they were always a setup, run by builders for builders. Slowly, that is still actually the case, by the way. But they look to try and offer more inclusive type, what's the word I'm looking for? So they offer more for their service. So they're not just a checker trade, for example. So, they do insurance-backed guarantees. They're actually number 2. A lot of people don't know this. They're number 2 by an NHBC for new builds. It's recognised for banks.
Well, that's what I thought this would be useful to mention to people, because they are a good organisation, and they are also trying to support and encourage, smaller builders and house builders. And you told me that a little while ago, and I didn't realise that in terms of new build warranties.
They're number 2 for recognised banks. So can't think of the director, Hayley Lombard, I think, was the director there. She wrote to everybody when they got the BuilderSure 10-year warranty. She virtually got every single bank on possible. So when you look at the CML forms and look at the banks that the FMB 10-year warranty is number 2. Which is one of the things that I've said there, because obviously I've been on the Southwest board there for probably 10 years, I suppose. I was director there from 2018 to 2020, so I sat on national board. And one of the things that I said to them before, which I still bat, I said I do think that the insurance could be the driver of that business, because the amount of people that I've said to, I said, why don't you use the FMB 10-year warranty? I've never had a bank that we've sold a house or we've built a house for somebody else for them selling it. Never had a bank that wouldn't underwrite with
So let's just explain a bit more and investigate how that works, right? So for me now, we talked about this before, right? I used to build a lot more than I do now. Now I trade a lot of stuff. I only build things that I really like. I used to construction manage everything. So I designed everything. I had my own guys, and we used to, obviously just subcontract stuff.
Yeah.
The last few things I've built, I didn't do that. I've actually put a contractor in the middle. Yeah. Now we're still very hands-on, like working together. It's almost like design and build, but I give them the super detailed design, and I'm on the inside working with them and all the rest of it. So it's a slightly bit of a weird hybridy model. But I do that because I don't build enough to have the setup that you've got, and I sort of don't want the ball ache, to be quite honest. And now, so I would say in terms of like developers of all sizes, actually, there's a sort of two main models really. You've got the construction management, which is what I used to do. It's effectively what Barratt's, Barclay, all the big guys do. But then you've got typically smaller developers that maybe don't actually know about construction or building, and they will always slot a contractor in the middle, because they don't know how to get stuff built themselves. Now, and again, there's advantages to disadvantages of that. The advantage, as long as you've got the right builder, is you can be much more hands-off and leave all the procurement and everything else and the management to them. Obviously, the disadvantage is they've got their margin on everything.
Yes.
Whereas if you're construction managing, you haven't got anyone in the middle, but you've got to do all the work, basically.
Yes.
So in terms of if I wanted to, in order to get the FMB warranty, I would have to be.
You've got to be an FMB member. And with the standardised insurance, they do an insurance which is 2, 4, 6 and 10 years forward. They actually do that for extensions as well. Again, you have to go through a process there. There is, because you're effectively selling an insurance policy, you've got to go through a process where you're already pre-qualified through the insurance company, because there's no, once you're qualified, if you sold 10 of them policies to 10 of your clients, there's no additional checks from them, so they don't come and check each one of your sites. Different for the builder short tenure for new builds. They do come out 4 or 5 times and do they have their own inspectors coming out. So they've got, I think they've got a couple of their own inspectors. If they're not around, they use, I think it's BBA. They come in and do the inspections. So they do actually do the physical inspections. But I mean, going back to obviously the contracting side, it's the same with, I tell people, I don't need to, I've been trading long enough, I don't need every job I see, right? But I do tell people as it is. I say, look, make sure you're doing your own work, even on a small 12-week project to 24 weeks, 36 beyond, right? You're going to spend a lot of time with that contractor, choosing wisely. And don't always choose it on the money, because, again, around my area where I've lost jobs and, they ain't got the guys, they've taken the job normally because they're just cheaper, and you pay in another way. So even if you paid the contractor what he agreed, but he took 3 times longer and you were renting another house, Mrs. giving you a load of grief because the builder's not, and so you pay in other ways. So, not always financially. So, we're not the cheapest contractors around Cheltenham. But I've never built anything I've never finished. Everything's finished.
So let's just say, so for the developers that maybe they're smaller or newer, or haven't got massive construction experience, so they're not set up to build for themselves, so they are going to want a contractor. What advice would you have to those type of people when it comes to looking for the right contractor?
As in, do your homework first. Obviously, rule 101 is obviously most people check. I just sent somebody a name and address and phone number yesterday, I think, to go and have a look at one of our jobs, which is similar to theirs. And you get a feeling, do you? You get a feeling, you just know, if you got somebody, in your house that you don't feel that is right, it probably isn't. Yeah, it probably isn't. You can't force the issue. But unfortunately, there's a lot of flyboys out there that have good tongues that can convince you otherwise, that, don't use Trevor, he's too expensive, he got too many overheads, and they justify my spend on my behalf. The reason why I'm so expensive is because, I've got 20 vans, I've got a project manager, and yes, that's right, but they're there for a reason. because now you've got to look at whether you want service as well as a good contractor. And there are other good small boys. You know, I always say, you know, you definitely want to, for small builders, they should definitely join the likes of the FMB for the other side of it. You know, they have got the help with VAT, the help with health and safety. They have got an app, which obviously we got an outsourced company, but they have got, you know, all them other things come along with, whereas Checker Trade, for example, is just a lead generation platform, whereas the FMB is different. And it's surprising, you know, if any of the lads down at the FMB, I've told them the insurance is that good, it could actually lead the membership, because you can't have the insurance unless you're a member, right? And take it for new houses, you know, they are trailing the NHBC, which is obviously number one, and not enough people know that.
No, like I say, I was really surprised when you first told me that. So
yeah. So so my advice on people, you know, you know, there are the likes of me, and there's other people around that are good builders. You know, most of us will just tell you how it is. You know, you look at all our commercial customers. You know, I've built some factories. You've seen a bus depot that I've built, and we've built various other stuff, and that's because of my style. You know, I'm not a thief, I'm not a liar, right? So I will just tell you how it is, whether it's good news or bad news, and that style doesn't necessarily work with everybody. So, you know, that there are lots of customers that I meet that I wouldn't work for.
Yeah, well, look, it's interesting. I'm the same, and that's their lookout, really, isn't it? There's a lot of people out there, as we know, that are full of shit. Some people don't like to be told how it is, straight up, and they'll find out the hard way, won't they?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens. So, you know, I even say to my guys, look, if there's bad news, just deliver it. Because, you know, once, you know, what you can't do is hide it, leave it till tomorrow. Just get it out in the open, and we'll deal with it from there. And that's part of the reason why, I mean, I'm moving premises now, but up until now, I've always had a phone system with the little red dot on, right? Deliberately. Because I don't want nobody knowing who's on the other end of the phone. Yeah.
So cool. Hang on, how's that work? What's that about?
No, so in our office, you know, if you ring, we're not going to know it's Paul Liggs ringing, and I don't want nobody to know.
Right,
because if you're ringing because you've got a problem, I want
Yeah.
your call to be answered, we'll call Paul back when we've got the answer.
Yeah.
So, you know, but that's, again, that goes a long way with people. You know, you will answer the phone. It may not be the answer you want, but I'll go and get the answer, and we'll sort it out one way or the other.
Yeah.
So that's from a contracting point of view. And people that are using contractors, I mean, if they're coming to developers, you know, so not somebody just building on their residential house. You know, if somebody's using a building contractor, again, you know, you've got to be looking at things like your services, because generally builders, you know, even builders won't do your electric, your water, your gas, your comms. You know, you've got to be really organising that yourself. We don't do that for nobody, because you can end up with inadversity, which happened before. You can end up with the bills potentially coming to us, or if there's a problem down the line, that's something the principal developer should be sorting. And obviously, if somebody's actually looking for somebody to build houses for them, I think you're always going to have to pay a premium, which is always going to hit your margin, because I don't use, you know, we just build everything ourselves. And yeah, I bring in good subcontracting firms. But in terms of using a good contractor, you know, I can give you a bad example in Charlton Kings, where somebody had used to build a great big, I think that was like a 7-bedroom house, you know, swimming pool, you know, it's very affluent area, and I think he's still got people there now, and that was, I was meant to build that probably 3.5 years ago, and that was him using somebody, giving them the chance to, you know, they've built all these extensions, they're doing pretty well, give them a chance. You know, it's too risky, don't give nobody a chance. You know, you've got to make sure they're experienced, they've built houses before, and you can actually go back and see them.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Or call me.
So let's talk about something that's been a big problem, really, for a lot of people over the last couple of years in particular, is obviously build costs. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, how have you been managing those?
Just fighting with the suppliers, really. You know, there's no, you know, they're pushing the price up as high as they can, and it's our job to try and drive them back down. And really, that's the problem with you know, if you're a small developer, you haven't got the spend, and you know, and unfortunately, it's where, you know, it's the same as where the more you spend, the more you save, because, you know, they don't want you taking your account elsewhere. So, you know, that's where, again, going back to why I still do contracting. If I look at the house that I built, I need to A, keep the team, and B, keep the rates. So if, like, for example, now building nothing for ourselves, I've got nothing coming out the ground, which breaks me, because I've normally got something going on every year. But then I would, in theory, lose all my guys. I'd lose all my spend, and I'd lose all the rates for them. So I keep that going so that I can maintain that for as and when, because it is a when, not if. When something else comes out, I'm ready to blend that into the diary, And obviously now, as I've said to you, I'm chasing quite a lot off market now, and trying to actively pursue that. The problem is, I could start an house next week, whereas it's a slower burn. As I said to you, should have started a year ago, really. But I didn't use LandInsight to the way that I should have been.
Yeah.
Although two things. Obviously, it's look, I'm involved in LandInsight. I think it's a fantastic tool. You were using it anyway.
I agree. Yeah.
But of course, also though, you got to know what you're doing with it.
Yeah.
You've got to know, how to and where to look to spot the stuff that everyone else is missing. And when you have spotted it, how do you get in there? How do you negotiate and tie it up on the right terms? And then, most importantly, how do you actually get the best planning permission?
Yeah, so that's, you and I are going through that process now. I'd never get rid of it, in terms of bringing, having to, old school wise, having to go to this website for that website, you have to go to 20 different websites to find all the information. I use it for a range of things, which is not just finding land, but obviously, I'm always checking planning permissions. I'm always looking at what else we've got on. We do some, I've probably got 40 applications in for different extensions and small houses for different people. So, it's a fast way of just getting the information,
Yeah. I'm actually working on, I've just created another prop tech business that's not being launched yet. So it's not public knowledge. I'll tell you about it afterwards. You could be a little beta tester if you want. You'll trust me, you'll like it.
Okay.
So I'll tell you about that afterwards. Final little thing, because we've talked a lot about on the construction and build side, which is an important part of the whole process, right? MMC, off-site construction, stuff like that.
I'm not a fan of it. Yeah, I don't like it. I mean, look, you only got to look at any more, look at the CML form, right? The CML form says traditional construction, tick in the box, skip these 20,000 questions we got in between and carry on, right? As soon as you go off market, people don't realise the trade-off for timber frame, for example. There is a trade-off. Yes, you fire the shell out, get on the roof, it's in the dry, start the electrics, build around it, yes. But then you've got the fire breaks, the bracing, all the other things that actually slow it down, and then there's other things like SIPs coming in, which is faster, and then you haven't necessarily got the bracing issues because of the way it's constructed. But all I would say is go back 6-8 years ago, you used to drive down, you'd see all these big developers just scaffolding up because they're putting the scaffold up before the timber frame. Find a developer doing it now. There isn't one. You can round all because all of a sudden they've had bigger problems with creaky walls and all the rest of it, and some of the stuff, there's one particular in Cheltenham where they did the basement with the I don't know what the blocks are called, but the ones with the polystyrene, ICF, all that kind of stuff. I mean, but it's it's not, I'm not a fan of anything off this constructed off market. I'm a traditional builder, and you only got to look at the CML form to tell you that any bank will lend you against traditional house. And as soon as you go on non-traditional, especially, timber frame, at least it's come a long way now. And I know if you go on passive, timber frame is, but again, they're using like a SIPS type system. SIPS is probably better than actual timber frame, but again, it's a lot more money. So, it depends what you're trying to achieve. But I personally, you talk to a carpenter, he tell you to build a timber frame house. You talk to a bricklayer, tell you to build it. I'm a traditional builder. So anything that I build myself, I'll probably never build a timber frame house. Having said that, I've built probably a handful for other people that was already specified. Yeah, so we're capable of building it, just not my favourite.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, important thing I think to say about all of this is horses for courses. Different things are right for different sites and different things at different times. That's what I think. I worked for did timber frame stuff years and years and years ago. I was never mad on it for a long time. It's sort of growing on me a little bit more recently for various reasons, particularly stuff around sustainability. And I'm one of my sites at the moment, I'm thinking about designing a super sustainable off-site, very particular type of timber frame house actually.
Yes. Yeah. So, to meet the EPC values, you want to get a carbon net zero and you want 100%, you're going to struggle to do that. You can do it in cavity wall insulation. I won the Sustainable House Award in 2022, 2023, and that was for a house that I built in Cheltenham, air source heat pump. It was traditional construction, but we upgraded all the cavity insulation, heat recovery systems, we had everything that you could possibly cram in there, and we got carbon net zero 98 out of 100 in terms of the EPC value, so it was doable. That was in traditional construction, because I didn't, again, I didn't want to build it. It was a 4-story house, and it was sort of steel.
When was that?
I think I built it in 2020, started, 22.
Oh, right, so not that long ago.
Not that long ago,
Very good.
So that, and then we won the Southwest Sustainability Award for new houses for that, because obviously it was certainly not off grid, but in terms of its EPC and carbon net zero, we ticked every single box we possibly could, whilst being still a traditional built house.
Very good.
Yeah.
I've just done 3 net zero ones.
Yeah.
But which you'll have to come and have a look at.
Are they traditional?
Well, sort of. They're actually steel frames, so they're obviously not fully net zero. Certainly not in the terms of embodied carbon, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting actually. So we were going to do them in SIPs. Started just around the time when OSB costs went bonkers for a little while, and it just completely flipped all the numbers. It just couldn't do it that way. Had to redesign it, have a quick look, value engineer stuff really quickly. So we ended up actually doing it in steel frame,
then building the panels traditional,
hot rolled steel, because we got massive big open span, super high. It was sort of the only half sensible way to do it, really.
Yeah.
So, bit of brickwork, lots of corrugated cladding, timber cladding. So, sort of traditional, but certainly not common brick and block.
Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. But even though you had the steel frame, then did you build all the panels with cavity walls?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So it was sort of halfway then. Yeah. So you still got a traditional cavity.
Yeah.
And a cavity's there for a reason. Remember, a lot of these single skin, timber frames and all, where they, SIPs, for example, where there's no cavity. I'm not, I know that they've got other barriers to stop the damp getting in, but a cavity is there to do a job. Hence, damp trays and weep holes, they're there to guide the water back out of the cavity. You'd be surprised how many bricks are more porous than they probably should or need to be,
Yeah. So, I mean, just on that, there's been a lot of change this last few years. Increased building regs, which is good in a lot of ways, but of course makes things harder and more expensive.
Yeah.
Future home standard coming in. You get much involved in that at all? Do you know much about that?
I don't know. No, I just sort of roll with the punches. I know that this April the building regs have changed again. I sent you that thing with the job of a building inspector. Technically, is classed as a regulator, and no longer is a building inspector considered part of the design team, because you want to ask him about Joyce 62s at 300 centres. He would let go, whereas now it's actually the developers / agents or the architect / homeowner or whoever's building it to actually justify it the other way. So you're not supposed now. I'm sure there'd be a rollover where building inspectors take a view on it, but now it's your job to justify. We are putting 62s in at 600 centres as opposed to asking. The same with the fabric of the building now. Every single one of our projects now are having the fabric designed, which actually is causing us a few problems, because you think you're just going to send a basic extension or small project to an engineer. He's just going to say, standard foundations, standard cavity walls, no steel because there's no knot through. And then all of a sudden we're getting reinforced foundations, reinforced floor slabs, horizontal steels in walls, which is then we're starting to use a lot more wind bracing, and that kind of thing, where a building inspector would take a view on the size or how long the flank wall was, whether you needed, movement joints. So that's pushing our costs up now. Because all of a sudden, an engineer's now pushing onto you, another 5, 6, 10,000 pounds worth of additional work just to end up building the fabric you were going to build in the first place.
Yeah, which is again, I think we've got to be building better and more efficiently and sustainably, obviously, but I think a lot of people don't realise that there's knock-on implications of that. Is the massive increase in costs.
Yes.
Does that actually make a lot of development, actually unviable now, because you can't afford to build it.
I agree.
In certain parts, certainly lower value parts of the country, unless you've got subsidised or free land, it's really hard to make stuff work.
Yeah. There is one that keeps coming on and off in Cheltenham, and that's for 12 flats, and there's the bill cost just outstrip. You would never,
So someone's just designed.
So yeah, well, there's 2 houses already on the site. So the first thing, they're non-standard construction, so they're not mortgageable, but they carry a value. So all of a sudden, the person that's selling it will not buckle on the price, and the resale value is already capped. And when you've got 4-story high block of flats, they are, the fabric of that building is not cheap construction. Yeah. And that will just sit around forever. And unless the only person really that can build it is the guy that owns it, because he already owns it, he's already in. Whereas the rest of us, we have to pay whatever it is that he's asking for in order to develop it. So that's a prime example where build costs outstrip the end value.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Talk to him about JV.
So it depends on how you look at JVs. I don't necessarily do JVs. I just do investments with people, which I suppose are JVs. But because I've been doing it for so long, we run it in one particular company, and I haven't actually done a joint venture with a landowner.
That could be a nice little model for you, actually. That, obviously, I'll show you how to do it the right way.
Of course.
But because, they can go wrong as well. But, you being a good, your own contractor, you are, as we've discussed before, that is you're in a good position in a lot of ways, actually. You're much better positioned than a lot of people in actually getting deals done,
Well, because there's simple modelling. I mean, some of the stuff I do with investors, the thing is I do the whole thing from start to finish. So if you was going to, let's say you and I were going to do a deal from a joint venture point of view, you'd put the money and I'd do the work, you and I go 50-50, right? If you were doing that from a landowner's point of view, depending on who was funding the build costs is how you would actually carve that up, because there's 3 elements. There's the land value, there's the build cost value, and then the profit on top. The land does not necessarily in itself drive 50% of the net proceeds after construction, because there's a second element, which is the build cost. So I've had this problem before with somebody where they wanted to put the land in for 50% of the profit. The problem is then if you was to carve the profits down by 50%, then you need to fund the construction. And then the cost of construction and any margin's got to come out the remaining 50%. It didn't stack up.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't quite work like that. So the thing is getting the model right and being able to explain that to landowners, because it sounds like 50% sounds like it's what it should be. Well, that sounds like a fair JV, but actually the economics of the whole deal just don't work like that,
No, agreed. Yeah. So, and again, that depends on the attitude of a landowner. I build, whether I'm building something for you, for somebody else, I'm building stuff all the time. Even in my current, our current size, I could do, we could probably do 2 to 4 houses a month. I'm running, I think we've got 8 live sites on now. We try and maintain an average between sort of 7 and 12, depends on summer ending, summer starting, that sort of thing. Eventually you want to get to a point where, we would just be developing, but, you've got to have reasonably deep pockets, as I say, to fund that, because, from the day you start building, whether you're selling, remortgaging, letting or whatever, you don't get paid until that end point. Yeah. I think a lot of people miss that, because they run out of money before they get to the end, or they get to the end and they can't sell it as quick. And then, all of a sudden somebody's trying to tell them to buckle on the resale values. They do every penny, the bank's already had is realistic 8, 9 to 12% per annum. So all of a sudden, if that's taking you 2 years, you've paid Mr. Lloyd's 24% inadvertently, and also it doesn't stop. So the only person that can lose actually is the developer at that point,
And it happens a lot.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. So right, one final little I often do this. One bit of advice, doesn't matter what it is really, anything you can think is important for perhaps other house builders and developers to think about?
I mean, as because I choose the right person if you're going to get somebody to actually build it for you. How you do that is paying the right money, I think. Because ultimately when you get somebody like me, and I know a few people like me, and the thing is when you've been trading 20 years, these guys, as am I, they probably carries a bit of like, I can deliver the site. So unfortunately, you may have to pay a little bit more for certainty.
Yeah, so I think that applies to everything really, isn't it? It's good advice really. Work with the right people and do know you get what you pay for.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Trevor.
Cheers, Paul.
Okay, mate.
Good to speak.
Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together we can all help create better places, spaces and homes and a much more beautiful world.